Sarah Jenkins adjusted the collar of her vintage velvet coat, ignoring the biting Chicago wind, her heart fluttering with the excitement of a young bride, despite it being her 40th anniversary. The garment was older than most of the employees inside the towering glass building she stood before, but it was pressed, clean, and held memories of a time when quality meant something. She shifted the weight of her canvas tote bag, the one she usually saved for church socials. Inside, wrapped carefully in double layers of foil and a thick towel to retain the heat, was a meatloaf. Not just any meatloaf, but William's favorite recipe, the one with the brown sugar glaze he had loved since they were struggling newlyweds in a drafty one-bedroom apartment. Taking a deep breath of the frigid November air, she pushed through the heavy revolving doors of Ethelgard Tech. The transition was jarring. The noise of the city street vanished, replaced by a sterile, humming silence that felt more like a hospital than a workplace. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and chrome, freezing in its own way. Sarah felt a momentary pang of insecurity. Her sensible shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor, a sound that seemed to echo too loudly in the vast space. She saw young men and women in sharp, dark suits rushing past, eyes glued to tablets, earpieces glowing blue. Nobody looked at her. To them, she was invisible, just another background detail in their important lives. She approached the front desk, a monolithic slab of black stone that looked designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Behind it sat a young man who looked barely out of college. His hair was styled in a trendy, gravity-defying wave, and his attention was entirely consumed by the smartphone in his hand. He was chuckling at something on the screen, completely oblivious to Sarah's presence. She waited patiently for a moment, clutching the straps of her bag, the warmth of the food against her side giving her courage. When he didn't look up, she cleared her throat gently. "Excuse me, young man," she said, her voice soft but steady, practiced in the politeness of a bygone era. Kevin didn't jump. He didn't smile. He simply ceased his chuckling and slowly lifted his eyes. He didn't look at her face first. His gaze started at her shoes, traveled up the worn hem of her velvet coat, paused at the canvas tote bag, and finally landed on her face with an expression that curdled from indifference to disdain. It was a look Sarah had seen too many times in her 60 years, a look that measured her worth based on her wardrobe and found her wanting. "Deliveries are in the back," Kevin said, his voice flat, returning his eyes to his phone. "Service entrance. Go around the block." "I'm not a delivery driver," Sarah corrected him, keeping her tone pleasant despite the sting. "I am here to see William Jenkins. It is a surprise." At this, Kevin stopped scrolling. He looked up again, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. The absurdity of the statement seemed to delight him. You're here to see the CEO? A surprise." He turned to the girl sitting at the station next to him, who was already giggling. "Did you hear that? She thinks she can just waltz in to see the boss." "I am his wife," Sarah stated, standing a little taller, though her fingers trembled slightly on her bag. Kevin burst into a loud, incredulous laugh that echoed off the cold marble walls. It wasn't a joyful sound. It was sharp and mocking. He shook his head, tapping his screen. "Lady, that is the funniest thing I've heard all week. Mr. Jenkins' wife? Look at you." He didn't just dismiss her. He saw an opportunity. In a world where humiliation was currency, she was suddenly valuable. Kevin lifted his smartphone, the camera lens pointing directly at Sarah's confused face, and grinned. "Guys, hold on, you won't believe who just walked in. This is content gold." The red recording light on Kevin's phone blinked like a warning eye, but Sarah, unfamiliar with the cruelty of viral trends, simply thought the young man was mistaken or confused. She took a small step back, tightening her grip on the heavy tote bag, the warmth of the meatloaf now the only comforting thing in a rapidly chilling room. She didn't understand why he was holding the phone up like a shield, or why his smile felt more like a weapon than a greeting. "Please," Sarah said, her voice wavering slightly as more employees slowed down to watch the spectacle. "I am not looking for trouble. I have a lunch delivery for William. It is our anniversary." Kevin played to his audience, turning the phone slightly to catch his own profile and the growing crowd behind him. "Did you hear that, folks? Now she's a delivery lady. Or maybe a scammer. We don't allow solicitors here, Grandma. And we definitely don't let random people harass our CEO." He spoke loudly, projecting his voice for the microphone, creating a narrative that painted her as the aggressor. Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "I am not harassing anyone. If you would just call his office." "I don't need to call anyone," Kevin interrupted, reaching for the oversized plastic cup sitting on the marble counter. It was a big gulp of cherry soda, bright, artificial red, and sweating with condensation. He swirled the ice around, a malicious glint appearing in his eyes as he looked at the camera, then back at Sarah. "You know, you look thirsty from that long walk from the bus stop. You must be parched telling all these tall tales." "I drove here," Sarah whispered, confused by the sudden shift in topic. "Here, have a drink on the house," Kevin announced. He moved as if to hand her the cup, but then, with a theatrical jerk of his wrist that was clearly staged for the video, he feigned to stumble. The motion was violent and deliberate. The lid popped off, and a tidal wave of sugary, ice-cold red liquid launched through the air. Sarah didn't even have time to raise her hands. The soda splashed violently against her chest, soaking her face and hair. It saturated the vintage velvet of her coat instantly, turning the soft fabric into a sticky, dark crimson mess that looked horrifyingly like a wound. Worse, the liquid poured down into her open tote bag, drenching the foil-wrapped dish inside. The lobby went silent for a single, heart-stopping heartbeat. Sarah stood frozen, the shock freezing the air in her lungs. Sticky red droplets dripped from her eyelashes onto her cheek. The smell of artificial cherry mixed with the scent of her ruined home-cooked meal was nauseating. Then the silence shattered. Not with gasps of horror, but with the sharp, barking laughter of the receptionists. "It's just a prank, Grandma," Kevin howled, zooming in on her devastated, dripping face. "Look at that reaction. That's going viral within the hour." The laughter from the desk felt sharper than the icy soda seeping through to Sarah's skin, stripping away 40 years of dignity in a single, humiliating heartbeat. She stood in the center of the gleam and polish, a solitary figure dripping in red, while the world around her seemed to shrink into the lens of a smartphone. The cold liquid ran down her neck, soaking into her blouse, but the chill she felt came from the eyes watching her, eyes that saw entertainment, not a human being in distress. She looked down at her tote bag. The foil was crushed and wet, the anniversary meal ruined, mirroring her shattered excitement. The meatloaf, prepared with such care that morning, was now just a soggy mess at the bottom of a soda-drenched canvas sack. Slowly, with a trembling hand, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple cotton handkerchief. She wiped the sticky syrup from her cheek, refusing to let them see her break down completely. She didn't scream, and she didn't curse. She straightened her spine, drawing on a reservoir of strength built over decades of facing a world that often tried to make her feel small. "That was cruel," Sarah said, her voice shaking but audible in the echoing lobby. "I am William's wife. You will apologize." "Whoa, relax. It's just a joke," Kevin scoffed, lowering the phone slightly but keeping the recording running. He threw his hands up in mock surrender, playing the victim perfectly. "Can't you take a joke? Now you're making a scene. You're being aggressive." He glanced at his coworkers for validation, and they nodded, eager to be on the side of the prankster rather than the target. "I feel threatened," he added, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he reached for his radio. "I'm calling security." Sarah looked around desperately for a single friendly face. Her eyes locked with a young woman standing near the elevator's Emily, and in turn holding a stack of files. For a second, Sarah saw recognition and horror in the girl's eyes. It was a plea for help, a silent connection. But then, Kevin shot a glare in Emily's direction. The girl flinched, looked down at her shoes, and hurried away, choosing the safety of silence over the risk of kindness. Sarah was utterly alone. Kevin leaned over the high marble desk, his voice dropping the prank tone for pure menace, enjoying the power he held over this older woman. "Get out before I have you dragged out for harassment," he hissed, his face twisted in a sneer. "The CEO doesn't marry people like you." Before Sarah could respond, the heavy glass revolving doors hissed open, and a hush fell over the lobby instantly, signaling the arrival of the one man Kevin was trying so hard to impress. The hustle of the lobby died instantly, replaced by the rhythmic, authoritative click of expensive Italian leather shoes echoing against the marble floor. It was a sound every employee at Ethelgard Tech knew well, a cadence that commanded attention without demanding it. The sudden quiet was heavy, sucking the oxygen out of the room, and even the air seemed to grow still in anticipation. Sarah was still trembling, the sticky cherry soda dripping from the hem of her coat, mirroring the mess Kevin claimed she was, but the newcomer saw something else entirely. She tried to turn away, instinctually wanting to hide her humiliation, to shield her stained face and ruined clothes from the impeccably dressed man entering through the revolving doors. She looked down at the puddle of red liquid around her feet, wishing she could simply disappear into the floor. Kevin, however, reacted with the speed of a desperate man realizing his stage had just been invaded by the director. His face drained of color, the arrogant sneer vanishing instantly to be replaced by a mask of panicked obsequiousness. He practically vaulted from behind the marble desk, rushing forward to intercept the CEO before he could get too close to the scene of the incident. "Mr. Jenkins, welcome back. So sorry about the disturbance," Kevin babbled, his voice pitching higher than usual as he positioned himself physically between William and Sarah, trying to act as a human shield. He flashed a bright, fake smile that didn't reach his terrified eyes. "We have a confused transient refusing to leave." "I was just handling it, sir." She was aggressive. "Security is on the way." William paused. He stopped mid-stride, his entourage of executives halting behind him. He didn't even look at Kevin. He didn't acknowledge the young man's frantic explanation or the phone he was still clutching. His gray eyes looked right over Kevin's shoulder, locking onto the crying woman standing alone in the center of the vast, cold room. The silence that followed was deafening, stretching out for seconds that felt like hours. Kevin continued to babble nervously, sweating visibly now. I told her to leave, sir. She didn't have an appointment. I've got it all on video for evidence. We keep the lobby safe, you know? Just following protocol." William brushed past Kevin as if he were a ghost. He walked straight to Sarah, his expensive shoes stepping directly into the sticky red puddle without a moment's hesitation. He ignored the soda splashing onto his polished leather, ignored the gasps from the onlookers, and gently reached out to take her shaking, sticky hands in his own warm grip. His face wasn't angry yet. It was filled with a profound, heartbreaking concern. "Sarah." Kevin's jaw dropped, his phone slipping in his sweaty grip as he heard the CEO speak to the intruder with a tenderness reserved only for family. "Sarah, look at you," William whispered, taking off his own pristine suit jacket to wrap around her soda-soaked shoulders, disregarding the sticky red stain it would leave on his silk lining. He smoothed her hair with a tenderness that made the surrounding employees hold their breath, transforming the powerful CEO into a concerned husband in a single gesture. He glanced down at the crushed tote bag at her feet. The foil-wrapped anniversary meatloaf he had been waiting for all morning was now a sodden ruin. His expression, previously filled with worry, hardened into absolute ice. William slowly turned to face Kevin. The softness was gone, replaced by a cold fury that was far more terrifying than any shout. "You called security on her? You threw a drink at her?" Kevin stammered, backing away until his back hit the marble desk. The phone in his hand shook violently. "Sir, I didn't know. She didn't have an ID. It was just a misunderstanding. A prank for team morale. It's just content for social media. Everyone does it." "Content." William repeated the word as if it were poison. He helped Sarah stand straighter, shielding her from the prying eyes of the crowd. He addressed the entire room, his voice booming without shouting, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You didn't need an ID to see she is a human being. You didn't need a badge to treat an elder with basic dignity. And for the record, she isn't a transient." Kevin tried to speak, but no words came out, only a dry squeak. The other receptionists had already backed away, distancing themselves from the blast radius. William pulled Sarah close to his side, his arm firm around her shoulders. "This is Sarah Jenkins, my wife, and the co-founder of the charity that funds your paychecks." He stared directly into Kevin's camera lens, which was still recording the live stream. "You wanted to be famous? You wanted an audience? Well, you have one now." He pointed a trembling finger at the door. And I believe you just filmed your own resignation. Kevin looked at his phone. The recording was still running, capturing the exact moment his career ended, and the color drained from his face as William pointed to the door. Get out. The heavy glass doors closed behind Kevin, leaving him in the cold Chicago wind, while inside, the warmth slowly began to return to the room. The silence that remained was no longer heavy with tension, but filled with a collective, shameful reflection. The staff members who had giggled earlier now looked at their shoes, unable to meet the gaze of the woman they had mocked moments before. Sarah looked down at the ruined canvas bag, heavy with sodden foil. I'm sorry, William, she whispered, her voice cracking slightly as the adrenaline faded, leaving only exhaustion. The meatloaf. I made it special for today. Happy anniversary. I wanted it to be perfect, and now. She gestured helplessly at her stained coat and the sticky floor. Now I've made a mess of your lobby. William laughed softly, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to chase away the last of the chill. He reached out and used his thumb to gently wipe a spot of red soda from her cheek, ignoring the sticky residue. My dear, I don't care about the lunch. I can buy 1,000 lunches. I care that you're here. I care that you're safe. He kissed her forehead, right in front of his entire staff, stripping away the corporate veneer to show the man underneath. You are the only gift I need after 40 years. A timid movement caught their attention. Emily, the young intern who had turned away earlier, stepped forward from the crowd. Her hands were shaking as she held out a stack of clean paper napkins she had grabbed from the break room. She looked terrified, but she didn't retreat this time. I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier, Mrs. Jenkins, she whispered, her voice thick with regret. She didn't offer excuses. She simply offered the napkins, a small, tangible act of atonement. I should have helped. William looked at Emily, then raised his head to address the rest of the staff who were still watching. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Let this be a reminder to everyone standing in this room. We build technology here, but we are defined by our humanity. We judge people by their character, not their coat. Do not let me see this happen again. Sarah took the napkins from Emily. Instead of scolding the girl, she placed a warm hand over Emily's trembling fingers. It takes courage to speak up, dear, Sarah said, her kindness remaining intact despite the humiliation she had endured. Find it sooner next time. She smiled, and it was that smile, forgiving, dignified, and maternal, that finally broke the tension in the room. William offered his arm to his wife, treating her like royalty in her ruined velvet coat. She took it, holding her head high. Arm in arm, the couple walked toward the elevators, leaving the staff to look at the sticky red puddle on the floor, a permanent stain of their shame and a lesson they would never forget. Like the vintage coat Sarah wore, true value is often hidden beneath the surface, invisible to those who only look with their eyes and not their hearts. When we choose to judge others based on their appearance rather than their humanity, we reveal the cracks in our own character, not theirs. Let this story be a gentle reminder that kindness is the only currency that never depreciates, and a simple act of respect can heal wounds that no amount of money can fix. If you believe that everyone deserves dignity, share this message to spread a little more warmth in a cold world.